Ford was built on the belief that the world doesn't get to decide what you're capable of. You do. So ask yourself, can you or can't you? Can you load up a Ford F-150 and build your dream with sweat and steel? Can you chase thrills and conquer curves in a Mustang? Can you take a Bronco to where the map ends and adventure begins? Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Ready, set, Ford.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana makes car selling fast and easy from start to finish. Enter your license plate or VIN and get a real offer in seconds, down to the penny. If you accept, Carvana will come pick up your car from your driveway. Or you can drop it off at one of our car vending machines. Either way, you get paid instantly. It's fast, transparent, and 100% online. Car selling that saves your time. That's Carvana.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.
Hello everyone, Chris here. Just a quick reminder that this episode of How We're the Podcast is sponsored by LifeScore Bet, a proud principal partner of Sunderland AFC. And if you're looking to get started, they've got a cracking welcome offer for new customers. Bet £10 on sports and get £30 in free bets. Simple as that. So if you're ready to join the action, make sure you're doing it with LifeScore Bet, the home of total betting. New members only. Bet more than £10 on sports within 14 days. Free bets valid 7 days. £20 to use on Sportsbook. £10 on Bet Builder. Terms and conditions and deposit exclusions apply. Please bet responsibly and remember, over 18s only. And now, cue the music. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast, sponsored by LifeScore Bet, as we gather the morning after the day before to talk about Sunderland ending an unbelievable 2025 at the Stadium of Light. The lads earned a hard-fought draw in the Lawrence de Buck derby as it ended in a strange 1-1 draw against a pretty impressive Leeds United, it has to be said. I wasn't quite sure whether to feel lucky that we remain unbeaten at home this season or frustrated that we weren't able to step it up a gear and collect all 3 points when the final whistle went. So, it's good for me that I have two gentlemen with me this morning to help me put it into perspective. So first up, I have Martin Wanless. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Chris. Yes, I think it's too late to say Happy Christmas, but I hope you had a good Christmas and I hope everybody listening had a very enjoyable festive period that was rounded off with a good point, I would say, at the Stadium of Light.
I'm glad you ended it like that. Well, for a start, I ate too much, I drank too much, and I split my jeans playing Mario Jamboree party thing with the kids. But how was yours? Was it the usual? One thing I was going to ask actually was what was the temperature?
It was 32 on Christmas Day. So it was very pleasant. Very pleasant. We sat outside until late. It was good.
How long did it take you to get used to that?
I still haven't.
Not out sunbathing and stuff on Christmas Day. It's just all wrong.
No, it takes a while to get used to it, but there's something to be said for it. It's nice.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite like that. I'm miffed off when we don't get a white Christmas, if I'm honest. It's just grey, dull and miserable as usual. But anyway, to help us decide whether Martin's last sentence was correct on the point that we got against Leeds, we also have, as we always do, the morning after a game, we try and get someone who, basically knows more than us. And today is no different because from the Sunderland Echo, we also have Phil Smith with us. Hello, Phil.
Morning. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Did you have a good one, Phil?
I did, yes. It was very, very quiet this year, which is exactly how I like it. So, yeah, really, really nice. Thank you. It's finally caught up with me. I've come down hard with the Christmas lurgy this morning. So if I sound a bit croakier than usual, that's why. But we shall soldier on.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been fighting the Christmas lurgy off since September, really, when the kids went back to school, if I'm completely honest. But yeah, how did you find that the last game at of 2025 in terms of the atmosphere around it? Because I thought it did feel, and we'll get into the game, of course, but just the atmosphere around it, I thought with such a huge 2025 that we've had, for me, I'm talking from afar, but it just felt a little bit subdued.
Yeah, I think the whole thing, I suppose, felt slightly underwhelming. But when you actually look at it, a game between two decent sides with plenty of chances, lots of talking points. As you say, maybe it's just the shadow of what we've actually had for the majority of this year, where we've had this quite ridiculous 6 or 7 months where we've had about 15 generational moments following Sunderland packed into about 20 games. So maybe in the kind of the shadow of that, it felt a little bit underwhelming. But I think probably my overwhelming feeling coming away from it, Chris, is that at risk of maybe sounding a little bit negative, is I think we were slightly lucky to get the point, and ultimately we're in a period of the season that we all knew was going to be incredibly testing. And any point really that we put on the board over the next week or two, in my opinion, is probably a good one. And I think to back up a really good point at Brighton with another point yesterday, I think it doesn't really feel great because I don't think Sunderland played particularly well, and that's never a particularly good feeling, is it, coming away from the game? But it's really hard for me not to just look at it as a point in the right direction ultimately.
Yeah, it is a strange one. It didn't seem to kind of sum up the 2025 that we've had. But one thing about it was obviously the game being on the 28th, Phil. Now, I put in the review for the game that I absolutely love my Boxing Day games. That it's just got a special atmosphere. And I think with it being on the 28th, I think it kind of changed that. It kind of changed the context of it, that people were then, you didn't have that buzz of the Christmas kind of period still there in the game. And being on the 28th just kind of diluted what the Boxing Day game, what it really should be.
Yeah, I think if it had been a Boxing Day kickoff, I think it would have felt like much more of an occasion. It would have been an amazing Boxing Day fixture. We had it once, didn't we? Leeds at home on Boxing Day, and we won.
Yeah.
I've got a hazy memory of an amazing atmosphere and game. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, selfishly, I quite enjoyed my Boxing Day this year, having a normal Boxing Day. But I very much do hope it was a one-off, because for me, Boxing Day is my favourite day of the year, football-wise. Absolutely love it. And I think you're right. I think it hasn't felt, I literally have no idea what day of the week it is. We've reached that stage. But yeah, it felt very unusual yesterday. And, for all that I didn't particularly mind having it as a one-off this year, I think it will be a massive shame if that's something that starts to get eroded. Because you're right, I don't think the occasion was quite the same.
Yeah. Well, just on that, I can't. Martin might be able to help us, but I can't remember the win. I remember the James Milner one on Boxing Day, but did we beat them on Boxing Day at some point?
Yeah, I've got a hazy memory of David Connolly scoring. The listener will be screaming at me. Tell you what, you two have a chat and I will do some digging.
Yeah, I remember. And actually, here's a quick quiz question for you. Unless you listened to the pod the other day, one thing people always forget about that James Milner one was, can either of you tell me who scored the winner that day?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because everyone thinks that James Milner scored the winner, but he scored the equaliser.
Alan Smith?
No. Any advance on Alan Smith, Phil?
No, I remember Milner, but I couldn't tell you anybody else. No.
It was a Robbie Fowler penalty with about 10 minutes to go.
Oh, was it really? There you go.
He strode up and sure he sent Tommy Sorensen the wrong way. But the penalty with about 10 minutes to go. So I always thought we were quite comfortably beaten and that day for some reason. But no, it was James Milner got the equaliser, and I can see Phil frantically looking for that. So we'll go to Martin for.
It was 2006. David Connolly and Grant Ledbetter scored.
There you
Two
go.
second half goals.
Well played, Phil. Much
Thank
better
you. That was torturing me. Thank you for that, Martin. Could have been a long hour. That, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well, typical me. I just remember the defeat, so I should get more on the wins. But Martin, let's get into it a little bit, because let's get into this the lineup, because obviously there was the news that kind of broke about Ballard, but looking about putting Sirkin in, looking at who we had available, I think that was pretty much the only option available.
Well, yeah, look, and it was a huge blow that Dan Ballard was going to miss out, wasn't it? Leeds are a physical team. We've seen what Dominic Calvert-Lewin can do over the past few weeks. And I was really looking forward to the battle between him and Dan Ballard yesterday. So for him to be missing, I think it took away from the game, and obviously it was to our detriment because he's been so good for us this season. I guess the other option that we could have considered was putting Gertrude back into the centre of defence and Dan Neil into midfield. And he was going to have to put somebody in who hadn't played for a while, wasn't he? So it was either going to be Sirkin coming in at left back and Hume over the right back, which he did, or Dan Neil coming into a really pivotal position in the centre of the field. So I think the Sirkin selection made sense. I certainly wasn't opposed to it. I think Dennis Sirkin's got the ability to step up as a Premier League player. And I think he's coming for a lot of unfair criticism. I think after yesterday, I thought he did pretty well, all things considered. And, it's his first game in the Premier League. It's his first, I know he played the playoff final and stuff like that, but he got crocked at Coventry, didn't he? And he'd just been called up the England under-21 team. He was in a really good vein of form. But you're going back, 9 months since that injury? He hasn't really had a good run in the side for 9 months. So for him to come in to a big game like that and play the way he did, I thought he did pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, just on that news, Phil, because I might be getting this wrong, but I've got a feeling, looking at any of the feeds that I was looking at in terms of the messages, that you might have broken that news. But how did you find that out?
I definitely didn't break it. I would love to claim credit for that, Chris.
All right.
But,
I thought I'd throw you on there just in case.
Yeah. No. I did kind of put the stuff out post-match about it, which is maybe what you've seen, Chris. But no, I as much as I'd love to, I can't claim credit for that. Yeah. No, I spoke to Le Bris afterwards. I think initially there'd been some reporting that it could potentially be quite a significant one, which it may still prove to be the case. But I think he's going for another scan today. Le Bris was of the view that it wasn't actually too serious, so hopefully it's not a long-term one. I mean, sitting here now on a couple of days away from the City game, I'd be amazed if he played in that one. But yeah, hopefully it's not too serious, but it sounds like he's going for another scan. So speaking to Le Bris on, let me get my days right, Wednesday.
Yeah,
speaking to Le Bris on Wednesday ahead of the City game the next day, obviously. So if people keep their eyes out, there'll be a proper update then, I think.
Yeah, you can just say we're speaking to him again this year.
This year.
And then
I had to be absolutely sure it was this year, Chris. That was the problem. But yes, it is.
But just in terms of the news actually breaking, Phil, because to be honest, all of this might have come out, to be honest, but I haven't read up on it in terms of when people started to find out about it, because, was it one of these things you think they really didn't have much time to plan for?
Well, I suspect not, because if you remember, Ballard sort of limped off at the end of the game against Brighton. He took a kick in the closing stages, and initially Le Bris was sort of, he's okay. Didn't say anything in his pre-match press conference, but a little bit of games there. I think obviously Leeds, so much of their prep will have been done around Ballard, won't it? Both in terms of attacking and defending set pieces. So I think it was one of those where the word started to kind of get out sort of in the day before the game. And I think by the time the team news came out, everyone knew it was coming, if that makes sense. But I think this is one that realistically Le Bris in his mind, I think from pretty soon after the Brighton game, will have known that he was having to kind of prepare for this eventuality. So I think Sirkin will have had a reasonable amount of time to sort of get his head around it. And I agree with Martin. I think Sirkin fell into the category of most of the team, where I thought he had an excellent first half an hour, genuinely really, really strong, and then wasn't at the same level for the kind of next half an hour of the game. I think it's harsh to single him out for the goal. Yes, he's probably pressed a little bit eagerly, but we do see Reynildo do that a lot. It was clearly kind of a directive to come out and press high. I honestly thought he did okay. I think he can feel pretty good about his first Premier League appearance personally. So yeah, if I'm coming away from the game, honestly, that was one of the positives that I took from it, was that if Sirkin needs to play another 3 or 4 games, he'll get better for every appearance. I took that as a positive to come out of the game personally.
Yeah. Just a couple of things on that, Martin, for you. Just with we'll get into obviously more about his performance, but just in terms of Sirkin starting, how do you think he is in his head with that? Do you think he is playing and saying, well, I'm kind of fighting for a contract here? Or do you think he's thinking, I'm putting myself in the shop window here?
I really don't know the answer to that question. Because, we're not privy to what's going on behind the scenes, so we don't know if there's been contracts on the table that have been fine and he hasn't signed, or he's waiting for something else, or he wants something else, or what have you. But I think regardless of what that motivation is, he is going to be motivated by one of those two things, and he will have been desperate to get out in that field and show that he is capable of playing Premier League football, won't he? We've had Masuaku in the squad this season, and I know he's away with AFCON as well now, but there's another bit of competition. Another left back was brought in during the summer, which kind of suggested Serkin's days were numbered. But I really like Serkin. I really like him as a player. I think he's got bags of ability. And I would love to see him go on a nice little run now and make it hard for Reynaldo to get his place back, which is what his aim should be, shouldn't it? If I'm getting a stab in the team, I'm going to make it really hard for the other players who come back to get the place back when they come back from AFCON. And I think you can kind of chuck Adingra in there, and we'll come on to his performance. But he's going to make it really hard. If he keeps playing the way he's doing, he's going to make it really hard for the likes of Talby and Traore and other people to justify their place inside when they come back. So that's what you want from these players. And, we always knew this period of time was going to give those players an opportunity to step up and step in. And I think we all recognise the squad depth isn't as deep as you kind of really wanted, ideally. But again, in context of where we are in this journey over the past few years, it's pretty good. And you've got a player like Serkin who can come in and perform, again, pretty well, I thought, for 90 minutes. I think it's testament to the squad depth and testament to him, because he wants to be a Premier League footballer, doesn't he? He's dropped all the way down from the Premier League to League One, and he's worked his way back up. He doesn't want to drop back down. So if the chance is there for him to establish himself with us or show he can play at the Premier League level, he's going to do all he can to take it.
Yeah, that's it. Premier League debut for Serkin. And Phil, I don't know if you've had any whispers, but does your gut tell you what might happen with Serkin? Because obviously, that's his first game of the season. Yes, he's had injury problems, but if that's the kind of game time he's going to get, you can't see him wanting to stick around, really.
Well, I think that's the key question. I think the Serkin situation feels a little bit different to the Dan Neil one purely because of the injury. And, it's an interesting one going back to the summer. If Serkin wasn't still struggling with those injury issues, do Sunderland go out and sign Arthur Masuaku? Personally, I might be wrong, but I'm not convinced that they would have done. So I think the ideal scenario really for Sunderland is that Serkin gets fit, adapts, signs a new contract, and then you've got really, really strong competition and almost like a succession plan for Reynaldo. The challenge is that at the moment, for all that I thought Serkin did pretty well yesterday, Reynaldo is exceptionally difficult to displace from that team, isn't he, this season? Because if we were to do a player of the season poll now, we imagine everyone's first choice would probably be Xhaka, but Reynaldo would be right up there. And I think at Serkin's age, it's very similar to Dan Neil. He needs to be playing. So I still have big question marks over that one. However, I would say that my gut tells me that there's a better chance of a contract being signed there than there is in the Dan Neil scenario, because Serkin has an opportunity now. I still think his preference would be to stay here because I think there's a genuine affection for the club here. And as you just said, he's worked incredibly hard to get to this level with Sunderland, and I don't think that's something he would want to walk away from easily. So I do think the injury has been a massive factor in how long this has taken. So let's see how the next kind of month or so goes, because if he can take this opportunity, then I personally could still potentially see something happening here. But I do think Reynaldo's a bit of a shadow on that one, because for all that I thought Serkin did okay yesterday, it's really hard for me to imagine Le Bris not putting him pretty much straight back in when he comes back from AFCON. He's just that good.
Yeah. And then just to stick with you, Phil, because you mentioned him before we get on to what happened on the pitch, because you mentioned Dan Neil, look, the whole mantra has been, wait till the AFCON, you're going to get your chance, wait till that period. And he hasn't had a minute in these two games.
Yeah. I think it just feels like that's heading in one direction now, doesn't it? And I think regardless of where you kind of stand on it, I know there can be quite a big debate around it at times. It's not really one that I've massively ever understood, really. I think what Neil's done for his boyhood club is outstanding, really, over a period of time. I personally think it would be a real shame and quite sad if he kind of ends up leaving, quite almost through the back door, really, with the way things are going. But ultimately, I think we've had enough time now to see that for whatever reason, whether it is just purely selection based or whether the contract is a factor in it, that Le Bris is preferring other options. And I'm not going to sit here and be overly critical of that. I think Detroit has had 2 good games, hasn't he? I think it's really hard to sit here and say, oh, well, I can't believe Detroit has played instead, because he's done well. And if you look at the last 20 minutes of the game yesterday, when we improved from a pretty difficult position, I thought Detroit was a really important part of that. So I'm certainly not sitting here sort of criticising Le Bris for that, because ultimately he's been ruthless and he's making the right decision to get points. But at this point, I mean, you guys tell me what you feel. It feels quite difficult at the moment to be sat here in February with Dan Neil still a Sunderland player, because, you know, we know that Neil had opportunities potentially to leave in the summer and he made the decision he wanted to stay and fight for his place. But if I'm in Dan Neil's boots right now, I'm thinking it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And he's in a good position in that he's already achieved more in his very, very young career than most footballers get to do in their entire career. And so my feeling at the moment is it's just time for him to maybe have a new opportunity and go and get some minutes somewhere. And sad in some ways, but I guess that's how football goes. I mean, you know, listen, we could turn around and he could be starting on New Year's Day, couldn't we? Because the squad is so stretched. It's hard to imagine Le Bris isn't going to rotate. But as you've said, we've kind of been waiting for this moment, and it just feels like now that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly bring you in on that, Martin, on the Dan Neil situation, because you could throw Patterson into that bucket as well, who's maybe in the same boat, maybe looking for, at the very least, a loan move for the rest of the season to get some game time. But the other aspect of it is looking at the bench. You know, the 2 Joneses, Hjelde, Tutorov. I mean, it looks very much, maybe obviously goes without Dan Neil and Patterson, but it looks similar to a championship bench that we had last season.
No, it doesn't. I think that's the problem, I think, with the strength and depth that we have, which I mentioned earlier. We once you kind of scratch that surface, and you know, we have got a few players out, and like when everybody's fit, that 18, 19 is strong, but once you go beneath that, there's not a tremendous amount of depth there. Look, I think I'm kind of with Phil. I'd be really surprised if Dan Neil is here at the end of the transfer window in January. I think if he is, that's his choice, because he wants to wait until his contract's expired and he can go out and explore other options, maybe fully. I think regardless, we'll reinforce the squad in January. So if he leaves, it'll only be because we brought players in as well, I suspect. But it is sad. It's a shame, isn't it? You'd like an alternative universe where Dan Neil comes up and is playing and really steps up and does everything with us doing as well as we are doing, or even better, which, you know, you can't have everything, can you? But it's such a shame with him leading the club up through the divisions, playoff wins, all that sort of stuff. For him to get used so rarely this season has been a shame. Look, what I will point out is when we scored yesterday, Dan Neil was warming up and he was in the celebrations. He was jumping in the celebrations. He was congratulating the Dinger and all that sort of stuff. So he's still obviously well connected. You know, sound like Le Bris on it. He's well connected with the squad and he's involved in it all. So it's not as if he's stood there sulking or not part of it. And, you know, I'm, you know, in a lot of respect, I'm glad we've got somebody or people at the club who are ruthless and are prioritising success rather than sentiment, because as fans, we'd probably prioritise sentiment, which isn't always the right way to go. But it's a shame. And I think, you know, yes, I suspect it was a toss of the coin between Serkin and Dan Neil, who got a run out, because as I say, you could have put Gertrude back into the defence and Dan Neil at midfield, but it wasn't to be. And yeah, I am surprised at the lack of minutes he's had this season, but I think, yeah, the writing's on the wall with this one.
I do, just to make one point on that as well. When you kind of chat about January, the kind of vibe you do get is that midfield is one area they would like to strengthen, and I think that probably feels connected to an extent. Because if you're Dan Neil and you're not getting in the team right now, when there's midfielders away and then another one comes in, and let's be honest, we're not going to sign a midfielder for the sake of it, are we? So you can kind of assume it's probably going to be at very least a starting contender. I think it feels like that's the way things are headed, unfortunately.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, Phil, because, you know, whether Regis Le Bris just kind of didn't necessarily trust him in the Premier League, or didn't think he just had the physicality. I mean, for me, I think it's all about the physicality of it, because if you look at that Gertrude coming in, I just feel like that's the edge that he might have over Dan Neil.
Potentially, he does have a physicality edge on Dan Neil, doesn't he? I mean, that is very much apparent. And I still feel like Dan Neil is a player there who certainly technically and tactically could thrive at this level in time. But I suppose Sunderland don't have time. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? And is it a case where there's things for, you mentioned that physicality for Dan to go away and work on? I think that there probably is, but yeah, I have really mixed emotions on it because I do think it's such a shame having worked so hard to kind of help get someone back to this level that he hasn't had more of an opportunity. The other part of me looks at it and says quite genuinely that what Dan's already achieved as a boyhood club is absolutely sort of astonishing, really, the memories he's been part of. 99.9% of footballers don't get that at any club, never mind their boyhood club. And he's at an age now where potentially maybe he can go and experience something new, different part of the world, kind of step out on his own 2 feet, if you like. And, hopefully if it does, which it looks like it will, he'll be able to kind of take the positive from that and hopefully have an exciting new chapter somewhere. But I'm surprised by how few minutes he's got. It's impossible to sit here and say he should have started more because he plays in Xhaka's position, right? So I love Dan Neil, but Grant Xhaka might be the best player I've ever seen play for Sunderland. It is what it is, isn't it? But I am surprised by how few minutes he's had. But and with potentially another midfielder coming in, it just feels like we're approaching the point where it is a sensible option for everyone involved.
And just before we get into the action, that's a good time to take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon.
Looking for ways to keep the kids entertained while traveling? Netflix Games lets them jump into fun, creative adventures at no extra cost. Everything's unlocked with your Netflix membership. From Paw Patrol Academy and Lego Duplo World to Barbie color creations and World of Peppa Pig, there's something for every little explorer. And you don't need Wi-Fi. Kids can play anytime, anywhere. Visit netflixfamily.com/travel tips for all your kids' holiday entertainment.
Retirement isn't just about closing out your career. It's living the life you've always dreamed of. With New York Life, you get the financial guidance to make it real. Start today at nyl.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And welcome back to How We're the Podcast, sponsored by LiveScoreBet. And we're going to get straight into the action, Martin, because I'm just reading my notes and seems like a long, long time ago, but reading through them, it's kind of good start, tempo high, press high. We're getting corners, thrown in that were dangerous, long throws. But it just seems like a bit of a pattern lately in recent games that we seem to come out the blocks, whether it's at the start of the game or whether it's just after half time. But we do seem to try and catch the opposition cold, don't we?
I think we try to sort of grasp the initiative, don't we, of the game, and we have started games really fast recently, and really try to get on top of teams because especially at home, I think we know that if we get a goal, the opposition have to come out, don't they? So they can't sit back and defend. We get on top of them, they've got to come out, and we've kind of really taken the initiative to Leeds yesterday. I thought we played really well for that first 15, 20, 25 minutes. I thought we were excellent. I thought we pressed them really well. I thought we had control of the ball. We barely let them out. I think they had a break or two, but nothing of any real significance. And I thought we were really on top. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that I know we'll kind of maybe get onto this in a second, but the turning point was them suffering an injury and having one of their best defenders go off, which at the time you think that's great for us. But it actually kind of turned the game a little bit because it changed formation. And from that point, I thought we really struggled to get the grasps with it.
Yeah. Just in terms of that shape early on, Phil, because I think it's definitely been something we've seen in the last few games that, out of possession, which very much looks, when you look at the whole pitch, it very much looks like a 4-4-2. And it was Enzo Lefebvre who was almost leading the charge in that press. And I thought he was absolutely fantastic. But it seemed like at times that Enzo Lafay was detached almost. And it seems like, I don't know whether AFCON has not helped in, I mean, Martin mentioned connections, but how the team are connected, because sometimes it seems like Enzo Lafay went and at times the other players were slow to react.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right in terms of you cannot expect to have this level of change almost overnight in a team and not expect there to be some teething issues. I mean, we have almost gone back to the 4-3-3, 4-4-2 out of possession, haven't we? That's kind of what Sunderland recruit to. That's the overarching kind of philosophy, if you like. So this is, what Sunderland want to look like in the long term. Obviously, there was a pragmatic decision made along the way, certainly in the early weeks of the season, to go to that 5-4-1 out of possession. And I suspect we'll see that again against Man City, which looms slightly scarily at the moment, I have to say, given their form and our list of absences, but maybe we'll get onto that later. But yeah, so I think you can see that Le Bris, having sort of had that five at the back for a while earlier in the season, which worked quite well, you can tell that especially on home turf, he wants someone to be a lot more aggressive in the press. And that's why you kind of see Lafay taking on that aggressive role. But to be fair, although we didn't create loads of chances, I find it really hard to level any kind of criticism really at the performance in the first 30, 35 minutes, because Leeds came here in excellent form and I thought we were the better team really. Proactive, good intensity about us, good aggression. Wasn't a perfect performance, but I thought we deserved the lead. And I think when you look at how many players we have out and how decent Leeds have been recently, and let's not underestimate Leeds either. We had a front row view to what a good team they were over the last couple of years. Daniel Farke, I think, is a really, really good coach. And I know the fact that he got relegated with Norwich means some people think he's not very good, which I think is a harsh metric to judge a manager by. But, we shouldn't be surprised that they're a good side. And yeah, nothing but positives about about the early performance. And as Martin said, the crucial moment in the game for me was when Tanaka came on. A very good player to leave on the bench, in my opinion. And I thought that you could visibly see, and I think it probably is down to the AFCON disruption, you could visibly see for that 10 minutes before half time that the players weren't 100% sure who was supposed to be picking up who.
Yeah.
And I thought that Leeds were able to really take control of the game probably for 30, 35 minutes after that sub was made.
One of the things that surprised me, Phil, I don't know if you've got any insight into this, was Rig playing on the right-hand side. And at Brighton, I kind of understood it a bit more because I thought it might be tactical to stop Brighton coming down the left, all that sort of stuff. I was a bit surprised to see him in that position yesterday. Was there anything from Le Bris about why Rig started ahead of, you got Mundell and Mayenda and other people who might be more attacking threats out there?
Well, I can certainly give you what I suspected starting, Martin. Maybe I'll put that on my list to ask Le Bris when I next speak to him. But I think there's two elements here. I think if you start, he really, I think, wants to give Adingra a proper go in his favoured position. So then you're in the same boat that you were with Adingra recently, where if you start Mundell on the right, it's not necessarily his favoured position. Is that what you want to do? I also think he really wants Mundell's energy off the bench, because at the moment, we discussed it earlier, we are really, really threadbare on the bench. And if you start Mundell and Adingra, you then potentially don't have that kind of explosive option to come off the bench later in the game. So I think that's a factor in it. And then I think it's a combination of Rig giving you more defensively than Mayenda would off the right. I'm not saying that's the right decision. I think Mayenda's been underutilised, but I suspect that's what it's about. And my suspicion is they think it's probably a quite good way to integrate Rig into the Premier League and give him a flavour of it. If you remember when he first came into the team, at the end of that doomed championship season, he did so off the right, and it was then at the start of the next season he moved into the middle. So I suspect there's a few factors into it. I think primarily it's probably because they feel he offers them a bit of defensive protection. But I also think maybe this is a good way to give him a flavour of Premier League football without necessarily chucking him straight into the heart of it, if you like. Because, listen, I thought he did some good things yesterday. That he should have had an assist for Broby. He was involved in the header that Broby put off the bar. But I think you can see that physically, he isn't always quite at it at Premier League level. And there's no reason why he should be. He's literally a boy. So there's no surprise in that. So that's a bit long-winded, Martin, but that's a few kind of thoughts on why I think things have kind of shaken out the way that they have done with that one.
Yeah,
No, he kind of did his best work when he drifted inside a lot of the time, didn't he?
He's a central midfielder, isn't he? There's absolutely, and you watch him and it's incredibly obvious that he's a central midfielder. So, but I think it's a feeling that maybe it's a lot to ask for him to go straight into the middle at Premier League level. And as I say, I think there's a bit of a thing about the makeup of the wingers and having to have some options on the bench to bring you some energy. Because if you start with Mundell or Dingra, there's then that question of where do you kind of go if you need to change the game later on, right? At the moment with the options you've got.
And he was almost volleyed by Michele in the box after about 15 minutes. He was almost volleyed up into the air. But actually, just on that, Phil, because I thought, again, you've already mentioned that in that first half an hour, well, certainly up until the goal, we were great. We were on top. Leeds did try and get into it. But the thing that was very, very obvious about how we went forward, and Martin's brought that topic in, was, and it was true earlier in the season with completely different combinations when you had Ronaldo and Lafayette down that left-hand side. But I think all season, we've been a little bit lopsided about how we attack. And I think this was, with completely different players, this was the same, that everything came down the left. Nothing came down the right. And you could say, well, yeah, Rig kind of drifted inside. But I think when you saw that when... trying to think, Trey Hume had the ball a lot of the time. Chris Rigg was trying to hug the touchline to give us the width, but that's not his natural game. But we just seemed everything was going to Adingra. And look, he looked sharp. He looked like he had the full back and he could beat him. But even when Xhaka got the ball, he just seemed to immediately look out on that left-hand side.
It's definitely tactical because it was exactly the same at Brighton in terms of how we built up and broke out in the spells where they had pressure. Xhaka would get the ball and his first look would be find Adingra. I do wonder if we mentioned earlier about the Sirkin/Neil debate. I do wonder if that was a factor in terms of wanting a natural left footer, because if you feel you're going to build up on the left hand side, that's where your main threat's going to be. If you play Getroida there, obviously he's played full back, but he's right footed, isn't he? So I do just wonder if Sirkin's attacking threat and the fact that he's natural in overlapping a Dingle was the reason why he got the nod as well. But yeah, I think it's natural when you look at the makeup of the team that we're going to lopside to the left. And I personally came away from the Brighton game, although I thought he'd been quieter after half time. I thought Adingra had done more than enough to justify another start and to justify that faith. I thought he worked hard in the first half of Brighton. I thought he looked quite lively without getting much support. And for me, just fair play to him because he's built on that opportunity yesterday. I think the thing about Adingra is you notice that the work rate is good at the moment. That's the starting, it's kind of the starting point. He's putting that shift in, which kind of enables him to get in the team. And I think you can see that he's probably got a bit more in terms of quality than the other options we have in the wide areas at the moment. And we alluded to it before, but he's got to be looking at this now saying, realistically, it's going to be another 3 or 4 games before the AFCON players come back. I could be borderline undroppable by the time they return if I continue on this road. And fair play to him, because how many times have we seen with a Sunderland player, they make a slow start and we just basically never really see them again. He's sensed an opportunity, and it's early days, it's only 2 games, so I don't want to get carried away, but he looks to me like a player who actually is really determined to make this work and to nail his place down. Fingers crossed this is the start of a bit of a revival for him.
Yeah, you reminded me of Ian Rogerson when you talked about players never been seen again. But anyway, around 25 minutes gone, I wrote the note, Martin, that Leeds United are better than the visitors. And then a few minutes later, we took the lead. And we have been talking about Adingra, and it came from, well, let's go right to the beginning, because it came from the Adingra tackle on Rodon, as we've touched on. And then it was a Michele long throw, headed out, and it was kind of analysed by Sky, but Xhaka reading the game, he knew exactly where that ball was going to drop, took that first touch, and then the disguised pass, because there was a pass out wide, and I didn't even see it. I have to admit, at first when Xhaka slid the ball through, I thought Adingra was offside, but the play went on, and then he curled it into the corner, and for a second I thought, oh, he's got his moment, and it's gonna be ruled out. But it wasn't. But really clever play from Adingra, taking up that position and getting his body shape right. I remember Henry doing this a lot when he used to curl it into the far corner, where he almost used to lean all the way to the left-hand side. But brilliant goal to put us ahead.
It was a fantastic goal and really well-deserved. I thought he'd started the game brightly and he had the confidence to take that shot on. And look, how many players, again, you've got the scenario where he's struggled to get into the side. He's obviously moved club. You got hauled off at Old Trafford, and you can kind of debate the rights and wrongs from a psychological point of view of making that switch in the first half. But we haven't really seen much of him since then. He's coming at Brighton, as Phil said. I thought he did well at Brighton. Like he started really brightly, but to have the confidence to take that shot on, rather than maybe play it a little safer and get a cross in or put it back in the box or whatever, was admirable, really. And he just showed the quality he has. The pass from Xhaka was superb. I actually thought Xhaka had a bit of an iffy game yesterday. I thought he got caught in the ball a few times and misplaced a few passes. But that pass kind of showed exactly what you got Granit Xhaka in the club for. He created that goal beautifully. I think that brought him level with Lefebvre for the amount of assists for Sunderland this season. I think both of them have 6 now. And great ball through. And yeah, fantastic finish. Brilliant. It was... I think the only thing, and look, we can talk about this a little bit later, I'm sure we will, in terms of the amount of chances that we're creating, because I don't think that was really a chance. It was an opportunity, but it wasn't a clear-cut chance, was it? It wasn't on the plate for him. He had an awful lot of work to do, and he created that goal, or him and Xhaka created that goal themselves. It was a great finish, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was a clear-cut chance. I don't know how highly it scores in XG, put it that way, but it was a lovely goal, and he enjoyed it, I think, didn't he?
Well, yeah, I think someone put in the chat that Sunderland had less XG at half time than Leeds. I'm sure it was one for Martin O'Neill. He would have loved that stat. But Phil, I mean, that is a point. I mean, look, the goal was absolutely fantastic, but he still had a lot to do. But, I think there was a stat that came up. I can't remember whether Sunderland have got the fewest first half goals in the Premier League this season or the joint fewest goals with Wolves in the first half. But it is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that, you see a lot of the XG stats flying around, don't you, on social media and stuff. And I know that understandably people can get a bit defensive around it. The reality is that we have kind of played on the edge all season, if you like, whereby we have prioritised trying to be solid defensively first and foremost, and we almost accept the attacking limitations that will come from that. And I think when you then take loads of our best players out of the equation, I think I don't know, is it realistic to expect that we're then going to create millions of chances against a strong Leeds side in good form? I just don't know if it is. And I don't know if that sounds like almost like happy clapping, but I just don't know on what universe you take 8 of our players out and expect us to just absolutely dominate against a good side. I just can't see it. So I do think there's 2 sides to this debate. I think if we continue with our performance level and attacking sense between now and the end of the season, I think it's really hard to see us finishing 7th. I do generally think I'd put a bit of store in XG. I think it's a stat that clubs use for a reason. It tends to even itself out. But it's not something that keeps me awake at night, because why on earth would we be one of the top 6 attacking sides in the Premier League, in our first season back? I just don't understand why we would be. So I think we've actually been better in terms of our attacking play than I expected the last 2 games. I thought we handled the ball pretty well for the most part against Brighton. And we did have some decent opportunities yesterday. I mean, 2 golden opportunities for Broby. Let's have that right before half time. So yeah, I do think it's inevitable that unless we continue to get better, the goals will start to slow and maybe the points will dip. But I actually think there's signs, Lefebvre being in a central area being really important to that. I think there are signs that slowly but surely we're actually starting to improve.
Yeah, well, that's it, because, look, the goal was around 28 minutes, and I've just got some stats, Martin, from the 30th minute to the 45th minute. We're talking about shots, and Leeds had 4. We didn't have any. They had 2 on target. We didn't have any, of course. Touches in the opposition box, they had 8. We had none. And the possession, they had 78% of the possession, and we had 22. But for that 15 minutes, I'm not quite sure. Was it Leeds? Was it us sitting back? Was it us almost kind of reacting to the fact we'd scored in the first half and took the lead, because we haven't done it all that often? What do you think kind of triggered the change in the game?
I think it's probably all of the above. I think the biggest thing that changed was that change in formation, because when Roden went off, they went back to a back 4. And we'd obviously prepared for them playing back 5. And we played really well up until that point with their back 5 in mind. And our game plan was built around that. So when that changed, it gave us a new problem, which I think we were pretty slow to click onto. But, as Phil says, that's completely understandable when you look at the context of the team and the selection that we were able to make or not able to make. Like, I've got the team written down, right? I've got the ideal team that we'd have. And I reckon, right, if Le Bris named his best 11 or his preferred 11, we only had 2 players playing yesterday in the positions that he'd play them in. Because you've got Alderete, who I reckon would be centre back in his preferred formation. Probably Broby would be up front. But Xhaka was playing the more advanced midfield role because Gautraudo was behind him. If Diarra and Siddiqui are in midfield, Xhaka's going to be a bit deeper. Lefay, would he be on the left if everybody's fit, potentially? Mukiele would probably be right back if everyone's fit. And you've only got 5 players, outfield players, who would be in that stronger side. So again, the amount of change that we've had to make, it's kind of understandable why we were a little bit slower to get accustomed to what Leeds were doing. But it's really unusual for us to concede that number of touches in our box. And when you look at games that we've had this season, the Chelsea away game springs to mind, the Newcastle game, the visitors game the other week. Like, we restricted their touches in our box magnificently well. And I thought we were probably a little bit easy to get round. And whether that was because Xhaka wasn't as deep in directing things in midfield as much or whatever. But I just thought overall we kind of looked a little bit leggy. We looked a little bit slow mentally as well as physically. But again, you've got such... I think, it's a really funny one to kind of analyse too much because there's just so much change in it. I don't think as Phil said at the top, I don't think we played well at all. And I think we were probably lucky to get a point in some respects. And it was that period of time. And I actually thought once we weathered that to half time, I thought, right, we'll get in at half time and we'll get that bit sorted out. So I was really pleased at half time that we managed to get to the 45-minute mark without conceding because we'd had such a rough 15 minutes to withstand. So I was I was glad to get in at half time with the scoreline intact.
Yeah, well, we did weather that 15 minutes, Phil, and then suddenly, last couple of minutes of stoppage time in first half, we woke up, and Chris Rigg played a fantastic ball over the top to Brian Broby, and he went through, just nicked it past the keeper. The VAR did look at a potential penalty, but I think it was half a shout at best. And then after that, Adingra got the ball on a break, fantastic cross, and Brian Broby, I thought this was the one that, you're talking 6 yards out. The cross was pretty much perfect. If he just does what kids are told, kind of head that down. I mean that's 2-0 going into half time, and you're thinking game over.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that second one is the one that'll really sting for him, sort of coming away from the game, because that should be his bread and butter, really, shouldn't it? As a centre forward. So yeah, I think it was a weird one at half time because you kind of looked at it and gone, well, we're lucky to be ahead because Leeds have just totally dominated for 10, 15 minutes. And yet we should have just put the game to bed. It was really unusual, wasn't it? And I agree with you, Martin. I felt quite good at half time thinking, well, we've got the opportunity now to actually get to grips with the change, which has clearly thrown us. So I was a little bit surprised that we struggled after half time in the way that we did. But I also think I think we've got to give some credit to Leeds for that because as you mentioned earlier, Martin, quite often I feel like people look at the stats of a Sunderland game and they go, well, hang on, the opposition's had 30 shots. They've been so lucky. But if you watch the game, you know that they're all from 25 yards and that's how we set up. And actually, defensively, we've been really strong. There was a definite difference yesterday, and I think you've got to give credit to Leeds. I also think you've got to give a lot of credit to Calvert-Lewin because normally our centre-halves, whoever they are completely dominant pretty much through the game. I thought Calvert-Lewin gave them more problems than anybody has this season as a number 9, if you like. And a lot of their chances came from Calvert-Lewin winning long balls into the box that normally we would just, hoover up. Absolutely no problem. Would it have been different if Ballard had played? It's impossible to say. It certainly would have helped, wouldn't it? So I'm minded, by and large, to give credit to the opposition and specifically, fair play at Calvert-Lewin. If they can keep him fit, that looks like a brilliant pickup. I know everyone's talking about his goals, but I actually thought it was his kind of throwback target man play that really struck me yesterday. Normally, we don't have any issues with that at all. And I actually thought we found it difficult at times yesterday.
Yeah. And then coming out the blocks after half time, I thought Leeds did to us what we did to the visitors and what we tried to do against Brighton, Martin, that they just flew out and kind of caught us cold, really. And it was one of those goals that you almost see happening. that we've done it to a few sides over the years, this type of thing, and you almost see it building up, and then you see the space in the middle of the pitch, and your head almost drops, and you go, "Oh no!" you can almost sense it. But I think that comes from I mentioned it at the beginning, that almost lack of connection, and Phil's already talked about the amount of changes, but I just think it came, Sirkin went, but then he was detached from everyone else. Chris Rigg didn't go. He didn't go all full-blooded when we were trying to press. I think people were trying to get him to go tighter. He didn't go tight enough. And then they ended up getting out. But it was this, I don't want to say half-hearted. I probably, it wasn't an organised press as we would expect to see, is it?
No, look, it was a little disorganised, I think. And I think you look at Sirkin then, your instant reaction is like, what the hell's the left back doing, being the furthest forward on the pitch, pressing in that position? Sirkin hasn't just had a brain fart and gone, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run up here and bollocks to everything else. He's obviously doing that under instruction. And you could tell that because of the way the midfield kind of moved back to cover. And I actually think this is something that we've tried to do, and we've done it against Bournemouth, we've done it against Newcastle, is really press from the off of the second half, start the second half strong, start the second half really aggressively. And that's what we were trying to do. We were really trying to get on top of Leeds with that press, like we did in the first half. And, we got caught out because they were able to manufacture that position where they can move the ball around and play us out. But we were trying to be aggressive. So I actually don't think they did to us what we did to other teams previously. We were trying to do to other teams previously what we'd done, but they were just able to play out around us. And look, you can pick fault at different parts of that where players could have done something different and all that sort of stuff. But it's a good goal. They've worked it really well. And they know what they're doing in terms of getting the ball into Calvert-Lewin. All of his goals have been in that little channel in the penalty box, haven't they? And he got on there to finish it. But I think it was kind of as a result of us trying to take the game to them and get that second goal that we should have got just before half-time to put the game to bed early in the second half.
Yeah, and I think this was the perfect example, Phil, that this goal almost made us look like a bit of a team of strangers with the way that we pressed compared to how we've been doing it earlier in the season. And then, you look at that initial press and you can say, well, as Martin's been saying, you could ask questions about certain players. But then even when they get into that position, and it's almost like a natural, scenario where somebody's got the ball out wide and you've got a striker, I thought Michele was very slow to react to Calvert-Lewin's run in the middle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, it's good centre forward play as well, isn't it? And yeah, it's a really, really frustrating one because it's not the kind of goal that we're in any way used to seeing the Sunderland team concede, because generally speaking, we are compact. That's kind of our main kind of strength, if you like, isn't it? And as you say, the frustration was having got to half time and feeling like, well, okay, Tanaka coming on, we've really struggled to get a grip of that. You really felt like that 15 minutes would be used to get things right, and it wasn't. So it is really, really, it was a tough one to take, but Leeds continued in that vein, didn't they? They missed a glorious chance a couple of minutes later when Vogel put it wide. So let's be fair, they were more than good value to get a goal out of this game.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Martin, just in that period, because Leeds were then, they stayed on top really, but I did think that it was always down the flanks. I thought we looked exposed down the flanks. Now, with the performances of Che Hume and Dennis Sirkin, Martin, do you think those two as fullbacks were a bit exposed? Do you think they didn't get the support maybe that they should have? Or do you think that, watching Ronaldo, do you think that, he's obviously, how experienced he's been, playing at the top level for years and years. You do see a difference when you see someone of that level and then somebody obviously who isn't that experienced comes in. But how do you assess their performances defensively? Do you think they didn't get the support?
I think it's kind of more along those lines than them playing poorly. I think they were left exposed a little bit. But again, you've got Sirkin coming into his first Premier League game, Adingra ahead of him who hasn't been playing much. And Phil said earlier, and I completely agree, that I think Adingra's work rate off the ball was fantastic. I thought he really put a shift in. He showed he really wants to work hard off the ball for the team and all that sort of stuff. But again, it's a new combination down that flank. On the other side, you've got Trey Hume and Chris Rigg, who've been teammates for a while. And it's not the first time they've played together down the flank, but it's not a usual thing for them to do. Added to that, I think a big thing was Xhaka not playing deep. And I know that might sound a little bit daft, but he organises and orchestrates everybody and pulls people into position. You can see it. He's barking at Siddiqui, he's barking at Lafayette. He's always onto people to get in the right position. And if he's 10, 15 yards further forward, like he was for a lot of the game yesterday, he's not having the same viewpoint. So there's potentially that to consider as well in terms of pulling people in. And, I'd be really surprised if he plays as far forward against Man City than he did against Leeds, because I think we actually need him in that position to kind of pull people into position and all that sort of stuff. So, but I think they came on really strong. And I was really impressed with Leeds. I think they're it's one of the best performances we've seen from an opposition team at the stadium like this season, if not the best. I thought they were excellent. And look, I think we struggled through a lot of that second half to withstand it. And I think we were fortunate not to concede a second, weren't we?
That's it. And I'm, again, looking at my notes, I'm going, just after the hour mark, I'm writing something like Sunderland are playing like the away side. And actually, we didn't get our first touch in their box until after the hour in that second half, Phil. But it was on 68 minutes that he made the double substitution. Chris Rigg and Brian Broby came off. Mayenda and Isidore came on. Now, I think we're getting used to Regis Le Bris being very proactive, Phil. And for this one, you were kind of asking for the substitutions for a good 10 minutes before it came.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it was obvious that something needed to give, didn't it? And I think, again, this yesterday felt a little bit like last season where Le Bris, one of the main criticisms people had, wasn't there, that wasn't proactive enough and didn't use his bench enough. And I think we've seen enough this season to see that it's not in his DNA to not use his bench, but if he doesn't trust players, then he won't use his bench. And I think yesterday felt like a little bit of a throwback, to be honest, on that front. I thought they were good subs that worked. I don't think we created enough to justify winning the game, but it absolutely changed the flow of the game. I thought we looked far more secure after those subs were made because we were able to apply a little bit more pressure on the ball higher up the pitch. Leeds were forced into going a lot longer, I think, a lot earlier, and we seemed a lot more comfortable with that. So I thought I think you have to give some credit to Le Bris. Maybe it was a bit later than it should have been, but I thought that really steadied Sunderland. I thought it was the last 20 minutes was a bit of a nothing game in terms of I don't think either side really looked like scoring, but from where we were in the game before that, that was kind of in a weird way positive. And I'm pleased that we found a way to get Mayenda on the pitch because I thought he looked really lively. I think you see what an incredibly talented boy he is in terms of his dribbling, and I thought he caused Leeds problems. So, yeah, I thought that phase of the game was, in the end, a positive for us because from a situation where you were almost waiting for Leeds to score, I thought that really changed the flow of the game, albeit it's not like we were, raining shots in, was it? But all in all, I thought that was a good change.
That's it. And just on that, Martin, because I thought the first two subs were a little bit late considering how the game was going. But then, as Phil said, 5 minutes to go. Mundell came on, and we tried to kind of step it up a little bit. Mayenda was trying to pick the ball up deep, but it just felt like from that 10 minutes, with 10 minutes to go, Leeds were knackered. I thought it might turn into a cup tie, the end of a cup tie at one point with the last 10 minutes. I thought it's all set up here. But both teams just looked absolutely knackered because it was a bit chaotic, a lot of that second half. And both sides just went, right, we're happy with this. It was almost kind of, going back to the Jimmy Hill last day of the season when we got relegated. Both sides just agreed on a draw, didn't it?
Well, to a large extent, I think we were pretty happy and content with the draw at that point, weren't we? Because we'd had to withstand an awful lot of pressure. And, it was interesting with the subs because at halftime, my instant reaction was, we need to make a change. We need to do something with the 11 that comes out. But then you look at the bench and go, well, what can we actually do? Yeah, you could bring Mayenda on for Rigg potentially, but then you're losing a bit more defensively from that right-hand side, and they've been causing us problems down the flanks, and they went on to cause us even more problems down the flanks. So it was a really tough one. Again, I think Phil said, Le Bris's instinct is to use the subs, but only when he thinks they will definitely make an impact. He doesn't really take a flyer off the benches. He doesn't think, I'll chuck him on, see if he does something. He puts people on who he has confidence in, can change the game. And look, whether you, I think there's potential to do something a little bit different, isn't it? Because we had Mayender and Isidore kind of up front together as a pairing for that last bit of the game. And I thought we caused them a little bit more, or more problems than we had done previously. And the question that kind of then springs to mind is whether putting Isidore alongside Broby for parts of the game would be interesting, because Broby, I thought, held the ball up really well, but we didn't have the players to link in with him close enough to then get that next phase of attack going. So you've got somebody like Isidore with his pace and Broby alongside him. I don't think the two have been on the pitch a great deal at the same time, have they, since Broby's been here? So that could be an interesting thing to look at potentially in the future. But look, I think at the end of it, Leeds were knacked. They'd given everything, hadn't managed to get the second goal. We were counting our blessings that we hadn't conceded a second, and I think everybody decided, yes, a point each will be a fine outcome that we'll all settle on.
Yeah. We've got to look at all this as a positive, though, Phil. People have been talking about AFCON for so long now, and everybody who knows anything apparently said Sunderland's going to fall apart during AFCON. We've had two performances, one away to a good Brighton side where we potentially look the better side, and then we play Leeds at home, and Leeds put in a fantastic performance. We look off, and we still keep the points ticking over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to throw this back to you two fellas. I mean, if someone had said to you after the Derby win, with knowing the players that were going to be available, and if someone had then told you Ballard would get injured, would you have taken 2 points from those two games, Brighton and Leeds? Personally, I would have, but I mean, you guys as fans, what you would have whether you would have been satisfied with that?
Yeah, I think that would have been the bottom line that you'd have accepted. Yeah, you'd say be content with 2 points out of those two games.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think 3 would have been maybe par. Would that be harsh?
I think you would have targeted this Leeds game, wouldn't you? And I think you would have probably imagined we would struggle at Brighton and then hopefully target this game. So yes, 2 is a little underwhelming, but then you apply the context of losing Ballard for the Leeds game, them performing strongly. So I'm not sitting here saying let's get dancing on the tables, but broadly speaking, I think the AFCON gamble paid off. Sunderland took the view that let's just sign the best players and they'll put enough points on the board when they're here to keep us up. That has worked, hasn't it? And I think we've produced 2 solid, if certainly not spectacular performances. So yeah, I find it hard to sit here and be particularly negative. We're in a sensational place, really. There's a huge amount as a team that we need to get better at and develop. But I don't know in what world that was going to be any different 4 months into our return to the Premier League, and particularly when you kind of rip the spine of the side out as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it another way, actually, in terms of rather than the points tally to Martin, but the fact that actually in these 2 games, the first 2 games of AFCON, losing these players, that actually if you'd said with those 2 games we're going to remain unbeaten, I mean, actually you'd think actually that would be impressive.
No, absolutely. Look, and I think one thing you can never, ever, ever fault Le Bris' Sunderland side on is the commitment and desire and the drive and the resilience and all that sort of stuff, because I think we've been magnificently good. 1-1 draw, 0-0 draw in the last couple of games. Yeah, 3 points would be nice. And I think you overlay the other stuff that we talked about with Leeds' resurgence and their run of form. I think when you were looking at this maybe 6 weeks ago, in the prospect of Brighton and Leeds are struggling down the bottom of the table and struggling to pick up points, it's a different game, isn't it, now compared to what it would have been 6 weeks ago? And Leeds are one of the form teams in the league at present. So for them to come to us, and look, I know we will all hold our hands up and say probably on balance they could have won, if not should have won. They could have very easily come away with 3 points. But for us to get those points on the board, and again, I think the other big thing is that we remained unbeaten at home, which I think is a huge thing. So we've got that in the box as well. We've ticked that off for the year, which is fantastic. And the other thing which I just think is these players who've come in, who've been forced to come in, and we'll see them again on Thursday. I think it is on New Year's Day, isn't it? And again, Tottenham and Brentford. Those players will be far better off as we get into February, March, because they've played these games. So the squad will be stronger And there'll be more options for them to bring off the bench to affect games because of this period of time now. So if we can just keep chucking a point here and there into the bag over the next few weeks to add to the already impressive total that we've got, like, I tell you, like, if you'd offered us this at the start of the season, you'd have snapped your hand off. If you'd offered us this time last year, you'd have snapped hands, arms, necks, legs, everything off, wouldn't you? Because the change has been incredible. And yeah, look, you can wish we'd won all that sort of stuff, and I'm fine with. I'm really fine with that point yesterday, given how everything went.
Yeah, and I'll let you chase this one up, Phil, because we've only got Manchester City to remain unbeaten. I'm sure there hasn't been a newly promoted side unbeaten at home for the first half of the season, but I'll let you chase that one up after. But going back to Martin's point, 2025, you go back to New Year's Day. Think of Sheffield United at home, 1-2-1, chasing down Leeds United and Sheffield United. You look at where Sheffield United are. But we've just played Leeds, way above them in the Premier League, thinking we maybe should have beat them, even though they put in a cracking performance. I mean, in terms of reporting, but supporting them as well, whatever, Phil, it's got to go down as one of the best years of following Sunderland AFC in whatever capacity.
Yeah, absolutely has to. I'm sort of, in terms of my sort of following Sunderland lifetime, which, I think my first season, it seemed like it would have been 99, 2000. So obviously that initial year was incredible. The Roy Keane had that little spell where it just felt like so much fun, so exciting. But I can't imagine that it's really hard. Sometimes you have a recency bias, don't you? But this has just been something else, when you throw in the manner of the way we went up and, chucking in a derby win as well. It's been absolutely astonishing, really. And maybe that's why I'm quite chill about a slightly underwhelming 1-1 draw with Leeds at the end of it. I think, we've probably had enough from the football gods this year, is probably my feeling. And if we get served up a couple of bore draws to end it all off, then you know what, I'll shake your hands and say thank you very much. It's been some ride.
Yeah, it is interesting though, Martin, that Phil says that because actually you look at the performances against Brighton and against Leeds. In past years, I mean, look, we're pleased with them. Don't get me wrong, but in past years would have been loading those type of performances. Oh, that's brilliant. That's how we should be. But 2025 has given us this warped thing that actually where our expectations have gone up so much that actually we have to kind of pinch ourselves and kind of put these into context, don't we?
Well, actually, it's two very different games, isn't it? I think the Brighton game was a good performance and we got a good point. I think yesterday we didn't play well and we got a good point. So it's two very different games. But look, I think you'd struggle to find any Sunderland supporter who, I completely understand people being critical of some aspects of the performance yesterday. I think it's only natural when you look at that game and you focus on 90 minutes. But all you've got to do is take a step or two backwards and look at that game in context with everything that we talk about with AFCON and the selection problems and all that sort of stuff, injuries thrown in the mix, and take a step back in terms of the context of where we are in the league. We've played 18 and lost 4 games in the Premier League this season. Brilliant, man. Absolutely brilliant. So we're not going to play well every single game. And this is the thing, you've got this desire to see the Sunderland side really click into 5th gear, because I think there's a lot of games where we kind of approach 4th gear and you kind of think, you can see everything. If everything clicks here with all these young players, we can kind of go up another level or two. And you're kind of waiting for that, aren't you? But that's not going to happen over these next few weeks until we get everybody back and settled back in and fit again. That we're just going to have to scrap and pick up points. And if we can scrap, keep with the right levels of performance and pick up a few points here and there, keep that tally ticking over, by the time we get towards the middle end of January with the players back, we can attack the second half of the season in a really good position. So I think you've kind of got to look at this period of time as slightly different in the context of the season. But again, if you look at it from the perspective of what we've achieved over the past 12 months, 18 months, absolutely brilliant, man.
Yeah, and just in case we don't catch up with you, Phil, I hope we do. But with January around the corner, what's your gut feeling? Because sitting 7th in the Premier League, Kirill Louis-Dreyfus hinted, I think it was before the Everton game, if my memory serves me right, that if we're in a good position, might kind of push things and splash the cash and kind of really go for it second half of the season. But what does your gut tell you about what we'll do in January?
My gut tells me a couple of bits of quality will be what they go for. I'm not going to say with too much confidence because I wasn't sitting here at the start of the summer transfer window being like, yeah, Granit Xhaka, Nordi Mukele. So we'll wait and see. But the vibe is that they want to be definitely proactive and definitely ambitious, but I think it's quality, I think, rather than quantity. I do think there's a lot of players in the squad that they want to give time and opportunity to actually show what they're truly about. And I think Adingra would be one of those, So I don't think there'll be a huge amount of volume, but I feel like we might have some exciting sort of moments where, it's really exciting players who are coming in. So definitely a midfielder, possibly a winger, possibly a striker. But I do think it's going to be quality rather than quantity. I think is going to be the overarching aim for this window.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you join us to talk all about those mega signings that we're making, Xhaka style signings that we're making in January to push us up to those Champions League places, Phil. But on that, I think that's a really good place to end it today. So just leaving it to say thank you very much, Phil. Really appreciate your time, mate.
Pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. And have a good new year as well, mate.
You too. Thank you.
Good stuff. And Martin, pleasure as always, mate. And
thank you, Chris.
And that's our last match preview of 2025. Yeah.
Or last match review. So
review. Yes, of course. Yes, you can tell how knackered I am after Christmas. I don't know when it's before the game.
We'll have one more preview, won't we? Before.
Yeah.
Before the new year really
this is
in.
The last match review, last game of 2025. But it hasn't been a bad year, has it, man?
No, it's been absolutely fabulous. I think you'd have to really go back to the days where we were winning league titles and all that sort of stuff to find a better calendar 12 months of football than we've seen over the past 12 months. I think you've got to sit back and enjoy that, don't you? As 2026 rings in. And look, who knows what 2026 brings. But 2025, I reckon, has been right up there in terms of the history of Sunderland.
Yeah, we'll have to need after this debate with Calvin, to be fair. but there you go. But thank you very much, mate. Martin, always a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Good stuff. And thanks again for everyone for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more on the Leeds United game on the Roker Report website as well as looking forward to the Manchester City game. And we'll have lots on How We're the Podcast on our daily releases. But from us, it's bye for now.